Hey guys, this is Denny from CoderLifeline.com, where we save coders hours of time and plenty of frustration when facing painful coding issues. Welcome to Lesson 4, the final lesson of our series on creating a custom pop-up opt-in. As you recall, we've been working to replace a MailChimp subscriber pop-up with our own custom pop-up. In the last video, we designed our custom pop-up on paper in terms of what we want it to look like as well as how we want it to function. Now in this lesson, we're actually going to implement the custom pop-up we've designed and talked about so far. If you haven't seen the prior videos in this series, there are links provided in the description below. You may find it helpful to check those out to get more background on the project. So let's go ahead and get started. Let's first go and visit the customer's site, and as you recall from lesson 2, we learned that the pop-up did not appear on the home page, but it did appear on some of the other pages. So let's just take a look and make sure it's functioning. And the first thing we're going to want to do is remove this from the existing site. So to do that, we're going to go ahead and look at the template for the site. Code like this is typically placed onto a template because you'll want it to appear on more than one page. In our case, we've got this template here, and we're going to scroll down and look for those MailChimp script tags. And here they are near the bottom, just as we saw in our prior lesson. Now, if you're using WordPress or some other content management system, typically you'll find these scripts placed in some kind of a widget or a custom header or footer plugin or reference. A lot of the WordPress themes will give you some kind of a custom script location or interface for you to plug these things in. So that's where I would expect to find this kind of code in a WordPress installation. So let's go ahead and delete those from our template, and then we'll revisit the page, refresh, and make sure that this modal no longer appears. Okay, great. So now that we've removed the existing MailChimp pop-up, let's start to add our own custom pop-up. So we want to start by just seeing if we can make that appear on our page once it's loaded. So I'm going to pull up the HTML for the pop-up window that was designed in Lesson 3. And what you'll see here are a lot of classes from the Bootstrap 3 library. These are easy ways to specify what part of your content should appear in the modal window. One of the key attributes that you need to add when defining a Bootstrap modal window is an ID. So we've labeled this section custom pop-up modal, and all these contents then will be part of our modal window. There's a couple of other key features in here, these buttons here that we've added. These are our modal buttons that will either accept or dismiss the offer that we're presenting on the window. So initially, we just want to see if we can make our modal appear as soon as the page loads. So to do that, I'm going to add some script down at the bottom of this existing file. Now typically you would move your JavaScript to an external file, but for the sake of this tutorial, I'm just going to keep the behavior and the structure of the modal together in the same file. So if we want our modal to appear immediately when the page loads, we'll use a jQuery listener that makes sure that any code specified within it is not executed until the document has completed loading. And that's this document ready functionality here. So within here, we need to trigger our modal. To do that, we're going to use a Bootstrap method that allows us to select our window via its ID. And launch a method on it called modal and show. This will tell Bootstrap that we want to make that window appear when this runs. So what we would expect then is that when we refresh our page, this method will be executed and our modal will appear almost immediately. So we'll save this change, and then let's jump over to the website and refresh the page. So as we were hoping, our modal, our new modal, appears immediately. So now, recall that we don't want the modal to appear immediately. We would prefer that it wait a few seconds prior to appearing. So the first thing I want to do is wrap this functionality in a helper method. And this will just help us to encapsulate all the behavior that we want to occur whenever we need to show our modal. So for the time being, this is simply to open our modal window. So this will give us the same functionality that we're currently experiencing, which is that the pop-up appears the instant the page is loaded. But if we want to introduce a delay, we can use a JavaScript function called setTimeout, which allows us to call a method after a certain amount of time. And to make this easy to change later, I'm going to go ahead and add a configuration section up here where we can place our pop-up delay. And I'm going to state it in the number of seconds. However, the setTimeout function from JavaScript needs that information in milliseconds. So we'll multiply that here by 1,000. So let's save that change, and then let's refresh our page and see if we've successfully introduced a delay before the modal appears. The page is loaded, and see, after a few seconds we see our modal appear. So that was successful. Next up, we want to make sure that the pop-up no longer appears once a person has responded to it. And if you remember, MailChimp uses a cookie that it places on the client machine to detect whether or not that's already occurred. So let's just see if we can place a cookie. So I'm going to add a couple of configuration variables up here to name our cookie and to set a value. And then this will just allow us to change these later if we choose to as well. Now, as an initial test, I just want to prove that we have the ability to set our own cookie. So to do that, I'm just going to place a cookie by using this JavaScript function every time the page loads. So far, we're not so worried about its response to a user selection, but rather we just want to place the cookie each time the page loads. So the notation for a cookie is name equals value. So we'll use our configuration and build a string to describe that sequence. So now when our page loads, we should run two statements. The first is to set a timer for when to make our modal appear, and the second is to place this cookie immediately. So let's save that change. Let's revisit the page. I'm going to open my developer tools so I can take a look at the cookies associated with this page. So I right-clicked, I hit Inspect, and now I'm going to select the Resources tab, the Cookies section, and I'm going to highlight my current site. So as I refresh the page, I hope to see the placement of my newly added cookie. And here we go. At the top of the list here is the cookie that we've just created. So now that we have the ability to set a cookie, let's go ahead and refactor our code a bit with a helper function to allow us to set an expiration date and time on that cookie, So I'm going to copy and paste in a helper function found online that eventually builds the same string that we've done manually down here. However, this will allow us to include a number of days as well. So we only need to call this function to set a cookie. And then let's specify the number of days. And since we want that to also be easily configurable, let's add that in to our configuration block here. And we'll set that initially to 30 days. Now we know that we want to set our cookie whenever the modal box is dismissed. So let's add a handler to encapsulate everything that we need to occur whenever our pop-up is dismissed. So to close a Bootstrap modal window, we use a similar method to the one we used to make that modal appear. So let's copy this function, and instead of passing a show argument to this method, we simply say hide. Now, since we know we not only want to suppress that pop-up whenever we dismiss it, but we also want to set that cookie, we know that we can move this call up into our handler for whenever a pop-up is dismissed. In order for this to work, we need to tap into an event that is fired whenever the user clicks on a closed window. So Bootstrap will offer these events to which we can attach listeners to handle that. So in this particular case, the handler we need to use will attach to our pop-up modal window. And the name of the event is hidden.bs.modal. And so in our case, we know that anytime that event occurs, we want to go ahead and initiate our own dismiss pop-up login function. So let's save our changes and then return to the browser to see what impact we've made. So remember, this cookie should no longer be placed until we close the window. So let's delete this version of it, and then let's refresh the page and make sure that that cookie does not return. So far so good. Let's refresh the list of cookies and make sure, and sure enough, it is not listed. So now let's close the window and see what effect that has on our cookies. Sure enough, the cookie is placed in response to closing that window. That matches what we want. Next, we want to add the functionality to check the presence of that cookie before we even show the pop-up. To do that, we're going to add a helper function that will allow us to get cookies quickly. And I'm going to copy and paste that code in. And then we're going to use that function to check the state before we show our pop-up. So instead of immediately setting this timer to invoke our show pop-up method, we're going to introduce an if clause to get the value of our cookie and make sure that only if it isn't present and it doesn't equal the value we expect will we actually set this timer to display our pop-up. So we'll save our changes and then return to the browser to see what impact we've had. So let's remove the existing cookie, refresh the page, and we'll expect the pop-up to appear after a 5-second delay. Now once we close this window, we expect to see the placement of our cookie. Sure enough, there it is. Now when we refresh the page, we'll not expect to see the modal appear again. And it didn't. So this works for whenever the user selects the close option at the upper right-hand corner of the window. But what about when the user selects to reject the offer? Let's clear the cookie, refresh the page, and find out if our cookie appears under those circumstances as well. So I'll click the Reject this helpful journal button, and notice I'm not getting any response. Get the same with the acceptance of the offer. So what happens if I click away from the window? Okay, it disappears, refresh, and sure enough my cookie is received. So that's one condition that we do want to see this behavior, but we need to add some functionality, some behavior to the accept and reject buttons. So let's do that now. So right now, these buttons do not have any link and they do not have a click handler. So we know that in all cases, we want to dismiss our pop-up modal. So let's just add an on-click event handler to invoke that function. We're going to add that same handler to both buttons. Now this should work to add our cookie and dismiss the window. However, we want to make sure that whenever our user accepts the offer, we redirect them to the offer page. So the link to that page is Sign Up Modal. Let's save those changes, and then let's revisit the site and make sure the new functionality is present. So let's delete our cookie and refresh the page. Now when we reject the offer, we do see the window close, which is good, and let's refresh our list of cookies, and yes, our cookie has been placed as well. So let's see about the accept offer page. We'll refresh, and this time we'll click the sign up link. It does close the window and it does forward to the sign up modal as we need. Let's refresh the page and refresh the list of cookies, and sure enough the cookie has been placed just as we want. So at this point our solution is doing everything our customer has asked for. We designed a visual look and feel that he likes, that has the product messaging and the decision psychology that he wanted to employ. We also developed some settings that allow us to manipulate the delay in seconds as well as the cookie expiration date or time. Once we're satisfied, we'll be ready to deploy that solution to the production site. We simply need to take any of the new files or modifications and push them into the production site. It shouldn't even take that long since we only added a couple of lines of code and a new template to this site. So that's it. You're ready to build your very own custom pop-up opt-in form. We hope you found this tutorial series helpful. If you have any questions at all, please reach out to either Eric or me, Denny. We truly love helping fellow coders, freelancers, and web entrepreneurs with this kind of stuff. You can also find our contact information in the description section below. And in the meantime, be sure to subscribe to our channel below so you won't miss more videos like this and some of the other cool stuff we're working on. So go ahead and share this video with anyone you know it might help. Until next time, keep on making the web awesome, and we'll talk to you soon.